A millionaire pastor, known across the country for his powerful sermons and lavish lifestyle, would have his entire world shaken by a single moment in the rain, a moment involving a forgotten little girl and a worn-out Bible that would humble him in ways no sermon ever could. It was a stormy evening, the kind where the sky seemed to split open and pour its weight onto the earth, flooding streets and forcing even the busiest city into a slow crawl. And inside a sleek black SUV sat Pastor Elijah Brooks, a man whose name commanded respect in churches, boardrooms, and television screens alike, dressed in an expensive tailored suit, his polished shoes resting on plush carpet as he reviewed notes for the night's grand service, a charity gala that would gather thousands. Yet despite the wealth, the fame, and the influence, there was a heaviness in his chest that he couldn't quite name. A quiet emptiness that lingered even as his driver navigated through the rain-soaked roads, the wipers struggling to keep up with the relentless downpour, until suddenly Elijah leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as something unusual caught his attention beneath a flickering streetlight near an old bus stop where most people avoided even during the day. "Stop the car," he said, firmly, his voice cutting through the hum of the engine. The driver hesitated for a second before pulling over as water splashed against the tires. "Sir, it's not safe out here," the driver warned. But Elijah was already opening the door, stepping out into the cold rain that instantly drenched his expensive clothes, his gaze fixed on a small figure sitting alone on a broken concrete bench. It was a little black girl, no older than 7, her thin frame wrapped in a faded dress that clung to her skin, her hair damp and slightly tangled, her bare feet resting on the wet ground. But what struck Elijah wasn't her appearance. It was what she was doing. She held a small, worn-out Bible in her hands, its pages swollen from the rain, and she was reading it out loud, her lips moving with quiet determination as if the storm around her didn't exist, as if the cold didn't touch her, as if the world had faded away and only the words remained. Elijah approached slowly, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Hey, little one," he called out gently, raising his voice just enough to be heard over the rain. The girl looked up, her eyes wide but not afraid. There was something unusual in them, a calmness, a peace that didn't match her situation. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze, the rain soaking through his clothes as he spoke. The girl gave a small smile, one that carried warmth despite the cold. "I'm reading, sir," she replied softly. Elijah glanced at the Bible, shaking his head in disbelief. "I can see that, but why here? Why in the rain?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. The girl looked down at the pages before answering. "Because when I read, it makes me forget I'm cold, and when it rains, it feels like God is still close." Her words landed heavily on Elijah's heart. He swallowed, struggling to respond. "Where are your parents?" he asked after a moment, his tone more serious now. The girl's expression didn't change much, but her voice softened slightly. "They gone, sir. It's just me now," she said, simply, as if she had already made peace with that reality. Elijah felt a lump rise in his throat. This was a man who lived in a mansion with more rooms than he could count, who had never worried about his next meal. Yet here was a child sitting in the rain, clinging to faith as her only source of comfort. "What's her name?" he asked quietly. "Amara," she replied, clutching the Bible a little tighter. "And you're not scared, Amara? Sitting here all alone?" Elijah asked, unable to hide his concern. Amara shook her head gently. "Sometimes, but when I read this, it tells me God is with me, so I don't feel alone." Elijah exhaled. Slowly, the rain continuing to pour around them as the world seemed to pause in that moment. He had spent years preaching about faith, about trusting God, about endurance through hardship. But standing here now, he realized he had never truly seen it like this, raw, unfiltered, without comfort or security, just a little girl and her belief. "Have you eaten today?" he asked subtly. Amara hesitated before answering. "Not really, but it's okay. Reading helps," she said, her voice steady. And that was the moment something inside Elijah broke. The realization that this child was using scripture to fight hunger, to silence pain, to survive. It humbled him in a way no criticism ever had. He reached out instinctively, his hand hovering for a moment before gently resting on her shoulder. "Amara, you shouldn't be out here like this," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. The girl looked at him curiously. "It's okay, sir. I've been here before," she replied. And that simple sentence carried a weight that Elijah couldn't ignore. He looked around at the dark, rain-filled street, then back at her, his decision forming even before he fully understood it. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "You don't have to stay here tonight." Amara blinked, surprised but not fearful. "Where?" she asked. Elijah gave a small, reassuring smile, though his heart was still heavy. "Somewhere warm, somewhere safe," he said. And for the first time since he stepped out of the car, Amara paused, looking down at her Bible, then back at him, as if weighing something deeper than just the offer of shelter. The rain continued to fall around them, but in that moment, it felt like something far greater had begun, something that would challenge everything Elijah thought he knew about faith, about wealth, and about what it truly meant to be rich. The little girl he had taken in from the rain was about to step into a world of luxury that would reveal something far deeper than comfort. It would expose a house full of everything except peace. The next morning, Amara woke up in a room bigger than any place she had ever slept, wrapped in soft blankets, her small hands still clutching her worn-out Bible as if it were the only thing that truly belonged to her. And when she walked downstairs, her eyes quietly taking in the polished floors and shining chandeliers, she was led to a long dining table filled with more food than she could imagine. But seated at the far end were Pastor Elijah's children, Marcus and Tiana, their faces already hardened with judgment. "So this is the girl from the street?" Marcus muttered, leaning back with a smirk. "She doesn't look like much," Tiana added coldly. Pastor Elijah ignored them for a moment, gently guiding Amara to a seat. "Go ahead. Eat," he said softly. But Amara only stared at the plate before speaking in a small voice. "It's too much. Can I save some for later?" Marcus laughed under his breath. "You don't have to save food here. This isn't the streets," he said. But Amara simply replied, "I just don't want to waste it. There are still people who are hungry." Her calm response left a brief silence at the table, though the tension only grew. And over the next few days, while the house remained divided, Amara stayed the same, quiet, grateful, and steady. She woke up early to read her Bible by the window. She thanked everyone for even the smallest things. And she never asked for more than she needed. But every evening, she did something that didn't go unnoticed. She would go to the kitchen, ask for leftovers, and then quietly leave. At first, Pastor Elijah said nothing, but curiosity soon pushed him to follow her one night. Keeping his distance as she slipped out through the back gate and made her way through the streets until she reached a familiar place, the same corner where he had first seen her, and what he saw there stopped him completely. Amara walked up to a small group of homeless people who greeted her with smiles. She opened her bag and carefully handed out food, making sure everyone received something before she kept anything for herself. And then she sat down on the cold ground, pulled out her Bible, and began to read aloud, her soft voice carrying through the night. And the people listened, not out of obligation, but because they needed it, because her words brought something deeper than food. They brought hope. Pastor Elijah felt something shift inside him as he watched from a distance, realizing that even after being brought into comfort, Amara had chosen not to forget where she came from. When he finally approached her, she looked up with that same calm expression. "Pastor Elijah," she said gently. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming here?" he asked, his voice heavy with emotion. Amara tilted her head slightly. "I didn't think I needed to. They're still here," she said simply. Elijah struggled for words. "But you don't have to do this anymore. You're safe now," he said. But Amara just smiled softly and replied, "I know, but they're not." And in that moment, standing under the dim streetlight watching a little girl give away what she could have kept, Pastor Elijah realized something that shook him to his core. That true faith wasn't found in the comfort of his mansion or the power of his sermons, but in the quiet, selfless actions of a child who had every reason to keep, yet still chose to give. The moment in the rain had already begun to change him, but what happened next would humble Pastor Elijah in front of the entire world and transform his family forever. The following Sunday, he stood before a packed auditorium, thousands waiting for another powerful sermon, lights shining, cameras rolling. But instead of his usual confident entrance, he walked onto the stage holding Amara's small hand, his expensive suit replaced with something simple, his expression no longer proud but deeply reflective, and as the crowd quieted in confusion, he spoke. I was supposed to preach about blessings today, but this week I met one, and he told them everything: the rain, the hunger, the little girl with nothing but a Bible and unshakable faith. And as his voice trembled, something rare happened. The man who inspired millions admitted that he had been spiritually empty despite having everything. I have wealth, influence, and comfort, he said. But this child has something I had lost: true faith. The room fell silent, many in tears, but the real transformation didn't stop there. Back at home, Pastor Elijah made a decision that shocked his family. He cut off the endless flow of money that had been enabling Marcus and Tiana's reckless lives, forcing them to face reality for the first time. Anger turned into struggle, and struggle slowly turned into growth. Marcus found work and began to understand the value of effort, while Tiana, after hitting her lowest point, sought help and started rebuilding herself from the inside out. And through it all, Amara never changed. She remained humble, still reading her Bible every day, still giving, still returning to help those she once stood beside. And in watching her, something softened in the hearts of Elijah's children. Years later, the same house that once felt cold was filled with something new: peace, purpose, and understanding. Marcus and Tiana, no longer driven by entitlement, had found meaning in service, and Amara, once the little girl in the rain, had become the quiet foundation that held them together. And one evening, as they sat together, Pastor Elijah looked at her with tears in his eyes and said, I thought I saved you that night. But the truth is, you saved me. Because in the end, it wasn't the millionaire pastor who changed a life. It was a faithful orphan girl who reminded him, and everyone watching, that true wealth is not measured by what you have, but by what you hold on to when you have nothing at all.